George H.W. Bush was less than a year into his presidency in the fall of 1989, and the next presidential election, the 1992 election, couldn't have felt farther away. But it was the first thing, and maybe the only thing, on the mind of a notorious corner-cutting operative named Lee Atwater. Atwater had been the mastermind behind Bush's 1988 victory, and he'd been rewarded with the chairmanship of the Republican National Committee. He was already thinking ahead in 1992 and how to get his boss reelected, how to win the White House again. Which is why in the fall of 1989, Atwater was keeping a close eye on the state of Arkansas. Everyone in politics knew its governor, a Democrat named Bill Clinton, wanted to run for president. No one took him that seriously. He was just one of countless ambitious and relatively obscure politicians with White House dreams. But Atwater looked at Clinton and saw a threat. He saw a young, telegenic, moderate Southerner, the antithesis of Michael Dukakis and Walter Mondale, and Northern liberals who just led the Democratic Party to 2 straight national drubbings. A guy who could win back exactly the kind of voters who were at the core of the Reagan-Bush coalition. A guy who could, under the right conditions, knock off George H.W. Bush in 1992. And so Lee Atwater came up with a plan. There would be a governor's race in Arkansas in 1990. Clinton would be running for re-election. He'd be hoping to rack up an impressive margin, ready to use it as a springboard to a national campaign. To Atwater, this was the perfect opportunity to nip a potentially huge problem in the bud. So very quietly, he found a candidate of his own. Tommy Robinson was his name. He was a loose cannon. He was a former sheriff known for off-color and inflammatory remarks and controversial tactics. Robinson had won a seat in Congress in the mid-1980s as a conservative Democrat, but in 1989 he abruptly switched parties. He was going to run for governor of Arkansas in 1990. And this was Lee Atwater's plan. As journalists Gene Lyons and Joe Conason later reported, he met in the fall of 1989 with Tommy Robinson's team, and he told them, "We're going to take Tommy Robinson and use him to throw everything we can think of at Clinton. Drugs, women, whatever works. We may or may not win, but we'll bust him up so bad he won't be able to run again for years." But within months of that, Lee Atwater fell ill. He was diagnosed with a terminal brain tumor. He was dead a year later. His plan never went into full effect. In the Arkansas Republican primary of 1990, Tommy Robinson lost to a far more reserved, far more mild-mannered candidate. A candidate who didn't throw any of the stuff at Clinton that Atwater had wanted to throw at him. Would history have been any different if Lee Atwater had lived? If his candidate had won that primary? If his plan to stop Bill Clinton had actually been carried out? We'll never know for sure. There's also no questioning Atwater's foresight. He saw Bill Clinton as a unique threat to George H.W. Bush, and he was right. And while the strategy he devised was as low road as they come, the instinct behind it was smart. It's usually not that hard to figure out who the other party's strongest presidential contenders are, who the biggest threats to your party are, long before the next election. And if you can deal with it then, if you can neutralize the threat then, you'll be doing yourself and your party a huge favor down the road. Which is what brings us to the biggest threat that the party currently in power now faces. His name is Chris Christie. And if you needed any further evidence that he is the Republican best positioned by far to win the White House back for his party in 2016, then just consider the latest NBC News poll. Of all the names surveyed, exactly one Republican has a positive favorable rating, and his name is Chris Christie. So the threat to Democrats is obvious. And Christie is on the ballot this year, just 3 days from today, in a blue state that voted for President Obama by 17 points last year, a blue state that last voted for a Republican presidential candidate in 1988, that last elected a Republican to the Senate more than 40 years ago. But there has been no effort by national Democrats in the New Jersey governor's race, no campaign swings by Obama, no visits from the Clintons, no big money pouring in from around the country. They're not even trying. Christie hasn't even had to break a sweat here. He's going to win, and he's going to win big. And then he's going to get to go around the country telling Republicans about how electable he is, how he and only he is in position to win over blue state America and to win back the White House. Of course, there's a reason the White House hasn't made this a fight. It's probably because of this.
The president has been all over this, and he deserves great credit. I've been on the phone with him, like I said, yesterday personally 3 times. He gave me his number at the White House, told me to call him if I needed anything, and he absolutely means it. It's been
that's great.
It's been very good. It's been very good working with the president, and he and his administration have been coordinating with us great. It's been wonderful.
Those words, uttered at the height of a crisis that played out just days before last year's election, essentially made Chris Christie the most valuable surrogate for Barack Obama's re-election campaign. Chris Christie is an important symbol for the White House, a real concrete example of bipartisan cooperation between Obama and a big-name Republican. It's the kind of example the White House spent so much time and energy searching for during its first term. They're not eager to give that up. And, of course, it's been just as valuable, probably more valuable, to Christie. His leadership during Sandy lifted his poll numbers in New Jersey to stratospheric heights. And by maintaining an alliance with Obama during the recovery, it's kept his numbers there. Sandy is what brought Christie and Obama together. It's what's kept the White House out of the New Jersey election, and it's what has Christie on course to win a huge victory on Tuesday. What remains to be seen is whether it will all come back to haunt Democrats 3 years from now. Joining us now to talk about this, we have former Virginia Congressman and now reigning up against the clock champion, Republican Tom Davis, MSNBC contributor and Slate reporter Dave Weigel is still with us, as is former Governor Christie Whitman from New Jersey and former Texas Congressman Democrat Martin Frost, now also getting a more formal introduction following his up against the clock appearance. Governor Whitman, I'll start with you as a resident New Jersey politician on the panel. I wonder if you could talk about what in the state of New Jersey, we think of just as a blue state, you won there in two very close elections in the 1990s, and now Chris Christie's probably going to win this thing by more than 20 points on Tuesday. Is this really something where Sandy, where the alliance with Barack Obama, where everything that happened a year ago this time just changed his governorship completely and his appeal in that state?
Oh, I think it was happening anyway. I mean, Chris is a leader, and he's taken on big issues. He's gone after the unions. He's gone after improving education, putting money in. He was doing things that people wanted to see, and the state had not been doing well after our previous two governors, between he and I. And he was starting to get the state back on track, making it feel good about itself. Sandy just, catapulted him into the national scene. But as far as New Jerseyans were concerned, while he took on the big issues, which means it's going to be controversial and there are going to be people that push back, he was clearly a leader, and people are anxious for a leader. That's what they're looking for.
But has it surprised you where the real lack of I don't believe after Sandy that Christie was going to lose this race, but has it surprised you the lack of interest that national Democrats have shown in this race? I think there was like an email message from Obama that went out to Democrats in New Jersey yesterday. That might be the entire extent of it. I was expecting more. I don't know. Has that surprised you?
No, not really. I mean, it's been evident for quite a while that Chris was going to be a very, very strong candidate. And unfortunately, while I have respect for Barbara Bono because she's in the Senate and she is a public servant and she has, a good intention, she's not a strong candidate at all. And she's got some very gaping problems with her association with some of the labor and for some of the positions that she's taken that have put her in a place where nobody's supporting her. And Chris has been very, very smart about meeting with Democrat mayors, doing things with Democrat mayors, so they'll stand up. I mean, I had Democrat mayors who supported me in my reelection. He's been able to basically sweep the field. And so there was nobody there for. So it would have been a losing proposition. The president didn't want to put his reputation on the line going out there and having the White House try to win and then get smacked. And it looked pretty from early on that they.
Well, so yeah, and so Congressman Frost, I get that calculation too. If you're the White House and you're national Democrats, the more you make a show of this, the more you're going to be embarrassed if you can't win or at least come close to winning. But do you think your party right now, Governor Whitman talks about in the state of New Jersey, the Democrats who've endorsed Christie, nationally, the lack of involvement, is your party setting itself up here where 2-3 years from now you're going to look back and say, geez, we built Christie up a little too much?
Oh, I don't think so. And of course, we were saved this time around by the Virginia race because we're going to win in Virginia. The Republicans have a very weak candidate. So this election is going to be a draw. You'll have a Republican win in New Jersey. You'll have a Democrat win in Virginia. And it's off to the next election.
But in terms of Christie, in terms of the image that we show that NBC poll that shows Christie as the only Republican they're polling, who when you talk about him nationally, has that positive rating. It's like a 2-to-1 spread, too, 33-17. When you look to all of the problems, I mean, we've talked so much about all the problems of the Republican Party coming out of 2012. It seems to me like you nominate Christie for president in 2016, at least superficially, you're going to solve a lot of those problems. Isn't that a concern Democrats should be trying to address right now?
It will be an interesting race. And remember, Steve, that since World War II, there has been no 12-year presidency by a single party other than Reagan, Bush. Every 2 years, after every 2 terms, the presidency has gone to the next party. So this is going to be a contested election. We all know that. It doesn't make any difference, quite frankly, who the Republican candidate is. Christie right now looks like he's the strongest possibility for them. But the Republicans will have some momentum going into 2016. We're going to have to nominate a strong candidate. We're going to have to work very hard. I think we can win. But I don't think anything was to be gained by trying to rough up Christie at this point.
Well, so in terms of what Christie is looking for coming out, so 3 days from now, we're going to have the election. As I say, he's probably going to win big. And Wednesday morning, we're going to start seeing, hearing what we're going to hear for, I think, 3 years to come. That's Christie and his people going across the country and saying, look what we did in this really, really blue state. Republicans, this is your ticket to getting back to the White House. Is that going to mean anything to Republicans?
I think it will, and I thought it was interesting that Governor Whitman referred twice to labor unions, starting with Christie being tough on them, continuing with Bono being too in hot to them. In 2010, when Christie was his national reputation was starting to develop, I remember going to Tea Party events in Virginia and Iowa, and people loved Christie because he was taking on the union. So he can, as soon as they help elect him, he can get back to that. But, if we'd been around a similar table in 2007 with similar pastries, we would have had this conversation about John McCain, because John McCain was one of the most popular politicians in America, has kind of recovered some of that with somebody that Democrats were fearful of running against. And there is a playbook. And one thing we didn't mention about the Game Change sequel, the Democrats, I think they didn't do it this time. It was hard to do it this time. Christie's has made too many alliances, New Jersey, to break into it. There's a little bit of confidence they're not screaming about yet, that there is stuff in his record as U.S. attorney that they can blood him up with. Not going to hurry to do it, but that they have dirt on them they can use.
Well, yeah, and also there's also, Tom, there's what the Republican process, we saw this with Mitt Romney last year. What was required of Mitt Romney? What he had to go out there and say. The whole self-deportation thing in 2012 was Mitt Romney trying to beat back Santorum and Gingrich in the primary. Does that process, I don't think, has changed. Is that going to change the way people see Chris Christie, forcing him to go through that just to get a nomination?
Well, Christie's from New Jersey. I think he really gets it. Remember, I don't think Romney could have been reelected governor of Massachusetts. Christie is reelected as governor of New Jersey. He understands all those booby traps out there and the landmines that you face to be viable in a general election. But more to the point, remember, Obama needed Christie in the closing days of that campaign when he was up there having a Republican governor with his arm around him. And I think for that reason alone, Obama and his team, they couldn't have done anything to Christie except get their own nose bloody, stay out of his race, and now they've elevated him.
But when we talk about...
one other thing, don't forget, Chris Christie is very socially conservative. Mm-hmm. I mean,
he is a pro-life, right, that's right.
So...
well, conservative enough. He's conservative enough. He's not super. He's not super hard.
But if you think in the Republican Party, right? If you think in the Republican Party that abortion is this litmus test issue, can you speak to that actually? The role, because I think that is interesting when we talk about a blue state governor. It is always interesting to me that Chris Christie's position on abortion is he's anti-abortion. And I know we said again in 1996 you were sort of in the mix for the VP thing. You're pro-choice, and to the extent that sort of made you a non-starter with a wing of the Republican Party, that doesn't exist with Christie, maybe.
That particular one doesn't. They still don't. The very hard right conservatives, the purist conservatives, he has, I think, about the highest negative numbers. That's where his negative numbers are, with the very hard right conservatives. But again, if these two elections next Tuesday come out the way it looks as if they're going to, and the Republicans lose Virginia, which it traditionally does not elect a governor of the same party of the sitting president, and we lose the demographics of women and minorities, and Chris Christie wins in New Jersey, and he picks up women and minorities, particularly Hispanics and black, then it's going to at least be pretty clear to people that if you want to win on a national scale, you've got to appeal to more than just the very narrow.
But the hardliners in the Republican Party don't care about that.
I know, that's the problem.
They don't care.
I agree.
And there's going to be a civil war for the nomination. He's not going to walk into the nomination. He may ultimately be the nominee, but he's got to overcome a lot. And very interesting what happened on gay rights just recently. A gay marriage. He initially said, "Oh no, he doesn't want it to happen," and then he got out of the way and let it happen. He got out of the way and let it happen. Yeah. And I have a feeling the social conservatives will remember that when it comes. And he will try to do what Mitt Romney did and blame it on is the court that forced it on me. What could I do? It's those crazy liberal courts in those blue states. But we'll pick this up in a minute because we're going to go from this northern state that's poised to elect a Republican. We will go south to a traditionally red state, now more of a swing state, poised to elect a Democrat Tuesday. That's ahead.